Today, our speakers are Dr. Matt Atkins, Maureen Martin, Michelle Wiley, and Kim Wiesner. Dr. Matt Atkins is the founder and CFO of SmarterServices. Matt Atkins is an accomplished e-learning developer with an expertise in applying game techniques to motivate online learners. Michelle Wiley and Kim Wiesner are both at Penn State World Campus. Michelle is managing the Academic Support Center, and Kim is currently the Student Success Coordinator. Thank you. Perfect. I should have had this slide up, guys. And before we begin, I just really wanted to set the stage and say that there are many things in 2020 that are scary. And one of those is the fact that many students are now studying online who prior to this did not plan on doing so. But supporting those students does not have to be itself scary. Today, you will hear from 2 institutions and 1 organization about strategies they are using to support students who are new to online learning. One such strategy is measuring learner readiness and then providing a tailored intervention plan. The assessment that will be mentioned is the SmarterMeasure Learning Readiness Assessment Indicator. We recognize that many of you who are attending this webinar already utilize this assessment. So there will be some implementation strategies shared that you may find useful. Other attendees may not be familiar with the SmarterMeasure Learning Readiness Indicator, so you might find it useful to know it is an assessment that uses non-cognitive data to quantify learner readiness in 7 areas: life factors, individual attributes, learning styles, technology, competency, reading recall, and keyboarding. As you see, our agenda for today, we will have Howard Community College sharing first, followed by Penn State Global Campus, and finally SmarterServices. I'm going to now turn it over to Maureen Martin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I am the instructional designer with Howard Community College, and my department is e-learning. Next slide, please. And we have a very unique approach at Howard Community College for how we have implemented SmarterMeasure and increased our usage with students. We have the faculty actually experience the SmarterMeasure assessment from the student's lens. So we have a certification course that I teach for our faculty to become certified online. And in the first week of our month-long session, the faculty take the SmarterMeasure assessment in the first 3 days of our express 10-day session of my course. And then the faculty reflect on the results. So it's really important to have them develop some self-awareness, and really they start to develop empathy and understanding for their students. And immediately upon this reflection activity, they find the value in the SmarterMeasure assessment and can figure out ways to differentiate their instruction and provide small group instruction, maybe based on learning styles or other information that they receive from the assessment. They really start thinking about how they can connect students to interventions across campus, whether these are online services or campus services that we have when we're back face-to-face. But the SmarterMeasure assessment is aligned. We have aligned the SmarterMeasure assessment to our campus resources, and we're going to be talking about those in a minute. So next slide, please. So one of the best things about the SmarterMeasure assessment is we have it integrated directly into Canvas. So there's nowhere else that students or faculty need to go. They don't have to use another username or password. It's integrated directly into Canvas, and it is really easy to find. So this is an example of the module where I have faculty take the SmarterMeasure assessment, and you can see it is integrated with a link right here in SmarterMeasure. Now we also have this integrated into our online template, which faculty use. So many times after they take my certification course, they say, oh, I want my course to look just like yours. How did you do this? What we want to use all the design tools and make everything look just like your course. And we want all of the strategies and tools that you use. So I've included the Smarter Measure directions and a page and the assignment and the reflection ideas, along with the link right in our online template for faculty to use. Next slide, please. So this is an example of the dashboard. And so if you use that link to take the assessment the first time, you can go right back to that link in Canvas and get this beautiful dashboard that's displayed right in Canvas. Again, super easy. You don't have to go anywhere else to get the results. And I can take a look at this beautifully color-coded dashboard and go, wow, I see a lot of blue. That's really great. Blue is indicating that there's a high readiness in these areas for these learners. And this is a snapshot of faculty that have taken my course. So you do see a lot of blue and a lot of green. With students, you may see more red. But if you look at the very first entry here, there's 2 red indicators that are low. One is the reading recall, and the other is the typing speed. So this would automatically give me information to talk to the student about, and making sure they account for that time online. So if they have low reading recall, they might need to plan additional time to read, because a lot of things online involve text and reading. So they need to account for that time to be successful in an online course. Same with typing. They need to account for the time to type a 3-page paper. And if a faculty member is finding that a student is struggling meeting the minimum requirements of the paper, and they're really trying to figure out what's going on, they usually find either the student didn't do it at all, or they go ahead and they look at the Smarter Measure assessment and they go, wow, there's a lot of red there. This is what's going on. I need to figure out what's going on, connect the student with resources, and make some modifications or differentiate the instruction in my course to help the student succeed. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the things I have faculty do at the end of the Teach Online course is to reflect on the course as a whole and tell me about their most powerful learning moments. And without a doubt, no matter what, I can guarantee more than 90% of the faculty that take my course at any given time mention Smarter Measure. They immediately want to implement it, put it into practice, and think it was one of the most powerful tools and things that they learned throughout this entire month-long or 10-day version of our online certification course. Next slide, please. So some things that we've learned from this implementation is that not only giving the faculty time or the students time to reflect on the assessment, which is really important, we also encourage faculty to give students points. So to get students to get something done and make meaning from it, we assign points to it, and it could be low stakes, right? But we want them to get the value, and really you'd give bonus points or extra credit, but somehow associate some points with it so that students see how important it is and get it done, and then add that reflection piece in there. And setting it up as an external tool in Canvas is just really super helpful and super easy, which makes everything one-stop shopping for the results, for the assessment, and for connecting to resources. Next slide, please. And we also have worked with innovative educators this summer to develop our orientation to online learning and our student success workshops. And we have these directly linked and directly aligned with our Smarter Measure assessment. The Smarter Measure assessment gives a resource page, and our resources are all linked here right in Canvas. we created a global navigation icon called New to HCC, which launches this dashboard that you see here. And students can get these resources right while they're in Canvas. As I mentioned earlier that I have a step-up student, which is our one-on-one coaching program at Howard Community College. And my step-up student and I looked at her SmarterMeasure assessment that she took in her chemistry class. And then we picked workshops for her to go through, one a week, and then we meet weekly for about an hour. And the student sets the agenda, and she is really enjoying the student success workshops and learning so much from them. So, next slide, please. And so this is an example of the student success dashboard where we have over 50 engaging and accessible on-demand workshops, from academic honesty to exam and test taking strategies to just online learning strategies and habits of minds. They can learn about a growth mindset. There's a wealth of knowledge and information out here for students, and it has been a huge success since we launched it this summer. Thank you so much for your time and having me speak today. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Maureen, for that wonderful presentation. And your contact information will be at the end. But as she mentioned, please chat in any questions specifically to Maureen. And now I'm going to next section.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Wiley, Assistant Director for Academic Development at Penn State World Campus. And my colleague and I, Kimberly Wiesner, will be talking to you about how we use SmarterMeasure at Penn State World Campus and what we did to help all the Penn State campuses this summer when everybody went remote. Next slide. So we started using SmarterMeasure a long time ago. So we're going almost on 10 years here, in 2011, and it was offered to online students at World Campus, but it wasn't mandatory. So it was available if they wanted to take it. Advisors would recommend it, and then students would take it, and advisors would follow up with students if students wanted to follow up on the assessment. And we toyed around with several different ideas of how we were going to make this happen, where we could get all students to take it, because we thought there was valuable information from the assessment, and we were correct. So in 2018, we embedded SmarterMeasure into our online new student orientation, which was mandatory. So even though SmarterMeasure was not mandatory for the students, because new student orientation was, students believed that SmarterMeasure was as well. So we saw a significant increase in the number of students who were taking the assessment. And that offered us the opportunity to be able to collect some data from the assessment and the students to see, what were the results showing us about our online adult learners, and how could we better structure resources to help them be more successful in their degree pursuit. So we're at the point now where we have enough information to know that this is an awesome tool that really can get students on the right track. So we're on the way to making this mandatory for all students. And we thought it was going to be just World Campus, but my gosh, after the summer, I don't know, it might be everybody. We'll have to see. So yeah, we're really on a good track with SmarterMeasure. Next slide, please. So in 2019, that's when Kim came on board to the unit, and she started offering consultations to students one-on-one who didn't score well in the certain subtests within the SmarterMeasure assessment. So from about September of 2019 until now, you can see the number of students that she's emailed an invitation to, and the number of students who accepted the offer to do a consultation, and then the number of students who actually completed the consultation. And Kim will talk to you a little bit more about that when she does when she comes on and does her slides. But the purpose of the consultation, we wanted students to really look at how they scored on the assessment and look for the areas where they were really strong and that they could capitalize in the online learning environment, and the areas where they maybe needed to do a little bit more work. So as Maureen spoke about earlier on her slides, the reading, the typing, our adult students who have been out of school for a very long time may have not had the opportunity or have been reading the kind of material that you would read in higher education. And then their keyboarding skills are probably, a lot of times just whatever they do on their phone and not necessarily a keyboard. So, we're seeing the same things at Penn State as she's seeing at Howard. And we wanted to be able to provide those students with, resources that target the areas where they really were needing more help. And then we use a communication system called Starfish, and we would document whatever consultation information that Kim has goes into Starfish, so advisors and faculty can see that information as well and know that we've been providing outreach to the students and trying to help them be more successful. Next slide, please. So in April, we got an email, we received an email from our World Campus leadership that said, hey, you're doing this for World Campus students. I wonder if we could do this for all incoming freshmen or incoming new students to Penn State. So that included freshmen and graduate students who were new learners to Penn State and were coming and going online when they had intended to be on campus. And they're like, hey, can you do this? And we were like, oh, sure, we can do this. So it was definitely it took a village to be able to make this, to be able to get this going and make it happen. We were successful in being able to deliver the assessment to all these students, and it went really well. And Kim is going to talk about that on the next slide. So, okay, next slide.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. So as Michelle said, it took a village and then some to launch this program over the summer. And I think Michelle did a great job of leading this team because in reality, we had probably 6 to 8 weeks to get prepared for this. There were 3 primary areas I would say that we focused on for getting these launched to all Penn State students at University Park, the graduate school, as well as our Commonwealth campuses. The 3 steps were primarily focused on modifying the SmarterMeasure assessment, training the Commonwealth campus staff, and having World Campus, figuring out how World Campus was going to handle the higher load of consults, particularly for the graduate students and the students at University Park. So the first thing we did was we took a look at the assessments. We needed to modify the assessments so that we could track which Penn State students were enrolled at the various Commonwealth campuses. We needed to make sure we were able to get those lists to the folks who were going to be conducting the consults so that they could reach out. Part of the outreach that we do for any student who has one what we consider a flag on the SmarterMeasure assessment, we send them an email and inviting them to participate in a consult. If a student has 3 or more flags, we actually will send up to 2 additional emails a week apart, again, in encouraging them to schedule the consult. So the Commonwealth campuses were considering a similar plan. So they needed to have the list of students that were taking the SmarterMeasure assessment so they could do those outreach initiatives. Once we created these 3 subgroups, and those groups would have been a University Park group, a graduate school group, and then we clustered all of our Commonwealth campuses into one single group. And so once we created those groups, we needed to further identify those campus of admissions, again, for those Commonwealth campuses. So at the very beginning of the assessment, we added a question so that students could select their campus of admission. It was a very, very easy process. The SmarterMeasure team was phenomenal in helping us get this set up again in such a short period of time. We also needed to identify the student athletes attending University Park because they have a separate advising team. And so again, we just added a question that appeared at the beginning of the assessment, the SmarterMeasure assessment, that students could identify whether or not they were a Division I UP athlete. So once we had the assessments in place, then we were good to go. We needed to train the Commonwealth campus staff. So once we identified who would provide the consults, we began first training them on the SmarterMeasure assessment and then how to use that assessment to guide the consultations. Over really a 2-week period, we offered 2 training sessions to 55 staff across 21 campuses. And I would say it was a great success. They felt ready. We've shared our tools with the Commonwealth campuses. They could modify them to suit their own needs. They could add additional resources or change the resources to match what they provided on their campuses. The last step in determining was to determine how we could manage the increased consult load for the University Park and graduate school. So we decided the best way was to actually have the students email us at academic support if they were interested in a consult. So once again, we went back to the SmarterMeasure staff and said, we'd like to do this. And so they helped us add a message in the SmarterMeasure assessment that actually appeared when the student completed the assessment, and it included a link so they could click on the link directly, connect with academic support to request the consult. During the summer session, we actually had less than 10 requests for a consult. So our summer enrollment, is lower. And so it was certainly manageable, but we offered this in the fall because it was so successful in the summer. We went ahead and offered it to the fall, and we did anticipate a larger need for outreach and connecting the students, at least helping them interpret their results and connecting them with resources. And we thought the best way to do that was to still offer the consults for students who wanted that one-on-one meeting. But we thought the better way to reach larger groups of individuals was to offer webinars. And so we did add webinars in the fall for the fall cohort. Went really, really well. In fact, so well that we'll be launching those webinars for our spring cohort at World Campus. So the way that the process worked, each week we received a report of all students who completed the SmarterMeasure assessment. Then we sent all the students at UP and graduate school an email that contained a SmarterMeasure interpretation guide. And then we invited them to participate in the webinar. And if you could advance to the next slide, please. This is the participation that we had really over probably an 8-10 week period in the summer and fall. We had 5,800 total students take the SmarterMeasure assessment. We sent more than 3,000 emails to students who completed the assessment, inviting them to attend a webinar. And we had about 7.5% of the students who received an invitation participate. So we were pretty pleased with those numbers at the outset. And again, that was so successful that it has incited changes, I think, at World Campus as well. Next slide, please. So you might ask, why offer the consults and webinars? Particularly the consults, they can be time consuming, they're one-on-one. And so the reason we decided to go with a consult is the value that it adds. And we found, 5 areas. First and foremost, discussing the target ranges for each construct really helps learners understand their SmarterMeasure results and really areas where they might need to improve. So I think, helping with the interpretation. The consults and webinars also provide an opportunity to highlight the differences in online learning, like asynchronous learning and group work. And so it enables learners to plan and prepare for that remote and online learning environment. And again, that enables us, this dialogue enables us to have, share resources with students, educate them about the resources available at Penn State. So it really is an ideal time to say, okay, now that we're thinking about, actually learning, and we're thinking about our courses because we're getting ready to schedule them, or we've already scheduled them, and you have this, calculus course, what resources do we have to help you? And so it is a great opportunity to talk about those resources, not only to support them in academics, but in other areas as well. The consultation and webinars provide space for the learners to ask questions and share any concerns. We've had several occasions where students actually self-disclose a learning disability, and so we were able to direct them to our disability services to discuss accommodations. And I think lastly, it is a great opportunity for us to introduce the student to academic support services and to fill them in on resources that we have to help them succeed in their online courses. So what do the students have to say? Well, students have indicated the consults are beneficial for a lot of reasons. I think one of the more common ones we see, it helps to increase the students' awareness of the resources available to support them. It helps students identify strategies to improve their learning in an online environment, and it really empowers students to achieve their goals. By helping students, making them aware of the resources and support available as they pursue their degree. And so I'm going to turn it back to Michelle. She's going to share with you what we have learned through this whole process.
Thank you, Kim. So lessons learned. First of all, patience was huge. This took so many people to be able to pull this off, and everyone was fantastic, from our upper level leadership to the folks at the other campuses to the folks at SmarterServices, Tara, Mac, absolutely amazing in terms of helping us get this assessment ready to go and distributed to these thousands of students. Communication is also the key. Again, you're talking to several people across several different departments and trying to coordinate the disbursement of this assessment across 25 different campuses. So communication was very, very important. SmarterServices staff, like I said, it was amazing. They did not hesitate to jump in when we needed them. Tara was able to throw together some trainings that she came in at the last minute to help our staff learn how to to better understand the assessment so they could coach the students through that. And webinars, we never thought a general webinar for a consultation would be something that students would be interested in, because everybody's results are so different. But it really worked out well, and we were able to save 150 hours of one-on-one time by doing just a couple webinars with larger groups of students. Some of those students did follow up with a one-on-one consultation with Kim, but for the most part, we were able to convey the messages that we wanted the students to hear and get them pointed in the right direction. And so thank you very much. And I'll hand it off to Mac, I think is next.
Thank you. I'll just do a quick introduction here. Now, Mac, we're so excited to learn about SmarterMeasure. Thank you.
All righty, thank you guys. And I think there's a new phrase that we've all learned this year, and that phrase is, that is so 2020. And so we have something that is so 2020 going on right now. Last night we had Tropical Storm Zeta pass over us, and so I'm not at home today because I have no internet there. I'm not in the SmarterServices offices because there's no internet there either. I'm actually in a church right now, and even during this webinar, the power has blinked here, and I lost connection. So my colleague, Julie Myers, who's in another location, is standing by. So if I disappear all at once, she's going to step right in. So just want to issue that caveat in case. But isn't that what we've all been experiencing this year as we're trying to teach students? We all have to give each other extra grace because there's things going on in our lives. There's things going on in technology that we can't control. And that's really what we're talking about today, is how do you continue teaching and learning in an environment that's not predictable? So go ahead and advance the next slide for us there. It's actually a poll. I would like to hear from you guys about to what degree is your institution already doing this. So the question is, does your institution utilize a learner readiness assessment? And there's a few options for yes. choose all of those that apply. Yes, you do offer it in admissions, or yes, you put it in advising. Yes, you allow your faculty to use it in their courses, or yes, you measure it somewhere else in the student experience. Or maybe your response is, I'm not sure, or maybe no, you're aware that your school currently does not do that. So take another moment or two there and respond to that poll. We'd love to know as a group the degree to which you guys as a cohort are measuring learner readiness. So we'll let you guys at Innovative Educators decide when to close that poll. And if you can show us the results, that would be awesome.
You got it, Mac. Too bad I'm not allowed to vote. But yes, Melissa will be releasing the results here shortly.
Well, you could have mailed in your vote last week, I think.
Long story, they were disputing my signature, but that's okay.
We'll give everyone just a few more seconds. Looks like votes are still coming in.
Yeah, we don't want to shut anybody off too early, Mac. Get all this good data.
While that's coming in, I'll speak to one question I believe a person named Amy had asked earlier about getting students to respond to email. And one comment that one of our panelists shared that's especially important in this process of utilizing this assessment is using custom text. There's ways that we can put messages to the students within their results or within what they see upon completion. And so communicating with the students while you've got them on screen is very important in getting that messaging correct, because many people don't look at email. You're right. Okay, so looking at the results here, 32%, which is the most of those are not sure. We've got several yeses. No, I'm reading that correctly. And looks like 33% is no and 32% is I'm not sure. And then several percentages there of yes in different places. With the we've got the most common place would be somewhere else. And then of course, 14% tie in the admissions or the looks like in a course. So thank you for that feedback. That's really encouraging to know that there are many institutions out there that are measuring learner readiness. We do consider that obviously a very good practice. And one of the things that really helps students who are new to online learning is an assessment like SmarterMeasure that helps them understand their traits, attributes, skills, and habits as it relates to learning online, because for many persons, it's a new experience. And so kind of keeping with our theme of Halloween coming up this weekend, that it doesn't have to be scary to support these students. You don't have to be afraid of what you see in the mirror. That an assessment like SmarterMeasure that measures learner readiness is a mirror that you're holding up for that student to allow them to see, you know, their traits, attributes, skills, and habits. We have sections of the assessment that are non-cognitive, those things I just mentioned, but we also have two cognitive sections. We have a math readiness indicator and a writing readiness indicator. These are not as diagnostic or prescriptive as, say, an AccuPlacer. They're both 30-item instruments that pull from a pool of 90 items. They're really just to help a school get a 30,000-foot view of a student's ability with math and writing, because those are often the cognitive bottlenecks. But the whole intention here is to allow a student to go into the online learning experience with their eyes wide open about who they are as a learner, about what to expect, about the resources that the school provides. And a learning readiness assessment like this is a great way to do that, to collect that data and foster those conversations. One thing I want to point out that's helpful to a lot of schools, in fact, there was one person in the chat here who had asked about the cost of it. It is variable. You know, schools that use a lot of it, like Penn State, pay a lot less than schools that just use a few of it. On the website, that person was looking at a price that's just if one individual student takes it, but it's far, far less expensive when a school has a license. So reach out to us with the number of students you have, and we'll give you information on cost. But this year, the federal government recognizes that you guys as schools are serving lots of people who are new to online learning. And so the CARES Act was funding from the federal government to your institution specifically for helping students as they're doing this new online learning. And many schools receive lots, millions of dollars of CARES Act funding, and the deadline's approaching. I'm not sure when that is, but schools have to spend that money or give it back, if I understand correctly. So if you'd like to do something like this, but you don't have money, ask around at your institution, ask your business office, where do we stand as far as our CARES Act allocations? Because several schools are using CARES Act, and maybe you're already a SmarterMeasure, user, and you'd like to prepay. We've had schools pay for 2, 3, some up to 5 years in advance of their license with that CARES Act money, and because it's a way to use that. So just wanted to toss that out, that is one possible source of a way to support this for your students. Okay, next slide. So keeping with our Halloween theme, if you're scared, someone is here to help you. And we do not want your students to be scared as they're new in the online learning process. And so a strong implementation plan is what you've heard from our colleagues at Howard and at Penn State, that there's someone at the organization who's looking at this data, that you're not just giving the assessment and letting it go at that, but someone's looking at it. Now, we understand that there's no right and wrong way to do this. There's multiple ways that you can do it. You just have to decide what's best in the workflow at your institution. Some placements that we most typically see would be in the admissions process, not as a gatekeeper, but really as one of several assessments that students take that help the school understand the student. Whether your school calls it an academic advisor or a success coach, whoever that person is that's front facing with the student, that's having those meaningful conversations about things like engagement and all those important topics, when that person is equipped with this data, it really enriches that conversation that they have with the student. As we were saying before the webinar, and some of you may have heard if you logged in right as we started, imagine you're an academic advisor and there's a student you're working with, and maybe they did not log in for the first week of the course. What do you say to that student? Hey, buddy, hang in there and do better next week. Well, that's encouraging, but it's not really developmental. But when that advisor or success coach is equipped with all this data that we're collecting about the student, when they know about how many hours a week that the student's working, when they know about their level of technology competency, when they know about their levels of motivation and control over procrastination, those are things that really enrich that conversation that the success coach has with the student. Some other places that schools put it is in an orientation course. That's really my favorite model, because the culture, the climate that you have in an orientation course is one in which the student knows, hey, this is an experience the school is providing to me to help me be successful. So their guard is down, they're there to learn about themselves, they're there to learn about the school. And so taking an assessment like this as an assignment in that course is a natural place. And then you can also have discussion board questions so that the students reflect within the community of the course. So it's often encouraging for the student to understand, hey, I'm not the only person working a full-time job while I'm going to school, or I'm not the only person that doesn't own my computer. I have to find somewhere else to go. And so there's solace in the community there. And then, as has been said here by both Howard and Penn State, it's really important for faculty members to understand that their school has collected this non-cognitive data about the students, and or that they can collect this same data in their courses, and then they as faculty members can use that data as they're working with their students to differentiate the instruction, to have that relationship with the student. So we have many faculty members that will embed the assessment directly into their course. We often see it in an English 101 course, because in those courses you want to get an early writing sample from the student. So what better thing to get the student to write about than themselves, right? So you have the student take the assessment, reflect on their scores, and then write a 1 or 2 page paper about their level of readiness and about the resources that the school is providing. So that's really a great experience. Okay, next slide. So don't be afraid to customize the assessment. So some of you guys already are using SmarterMeasure. This may be some content here that may be helpful or new to you. A few of these things you've heard Howard and Penn State mention today. Did you know that you can add custom questions to the assessment? While we do try to keep the actual assessment questions standardized so that we can do peer institution comparisons and those sorts of things, we recognize that there are some other things that you may want to ask your students, and use our platform as a great time to do that. So you can add up to 99 custom questions, and these appear on that first screen that the student sees. Also, the way that you administer the assessment is not a one-size-fits-all across your institution. You can have multiple assessment groups. So maybe you've got incoming freshmen in one group, you've got graduate students in another group, or you've got College of Education in one group and College of Business in another group. However you parse out your student body, there may be one group that you want to take all of the assessment and another group that you just want to take part. So know that you can deploy the assessment differently for different subsets of your students. You also do not have to administer the full assessment. While we listed earlier the 7 scales that we measure, you don't have to offer all 7. Like one scale that sometimes schools will turn off may be learning styles. So maybe you want to turn that off. Well, you can, or you can add it, you can reorder it, you're in control. There's a thing called disaggregate mode that's especially useful in some instances. Our standard mode is called sequential, and that's so the student takes one section, then they go to the next section, then the next. Disaggregate mode is sort of a buffet mode where the student sees a screen, they see a description of each of the 7 scales, then they can choose the order in which they take that scale. This works well maybe like in an orientation course where the student is proceeding at their own pace. And so just know disaggregate mode is something that's available to you. One of our presenters earlier from Howard showed you the screen there about, yeah, go back a couple of slides. Go back to, there you go, about she showed the, what I call the at a glance view that had the high, medium and low levels of readiness. There you go, that's the slide. Oh, we keep jumping around. Right there, stay right there. So that's called adjusting the readiness ranges, where you can adjust the cut points that make that determination about a high level of readiness, medium level of readiness, or low level of readiness. It's very important to understand that students never see that declaration. They don't know in which category they are, but you as the faculty member or the administration or the success coaches, it's really helpful to categorize students into one of those 3 categories, and you can adjust the cut points that make that determination. It's very important that you know that you can edit the resources for support. Penn State said that they had done that. That's been very helpful to them. As you know, on each page of the score report at the bottom, there are several resources for support. By default, those are just free web-based resources, but you can take out all of those. You can add things that your school provides. We also provide a list of video-based resources for support if you're interested in that. You can customize the introductory wording. We already talked at one point in this webinar about the importance of the messaging that you give to students throughout the experience of the assessment. We'll know that you can change that wording. So while I said the assessment itself is standardized, all of the text that describes the assessment, you can edit. And you can even call it something different. While we market it as SmarterMeasure, you can call it, you know, your institution's readiness assessment. That's fine. So just know that you can change that wording. And the last one is to get notified. This was mentioned by one of the earlier presenters as well, that there is a feature in the admin panel that if someone at your organization, or someone's, it can be multiple people, would like to get an email alerting them to the fact that someone has completed the assessment, that can be done. So hopefully there's something new there that you did not know you could do. If you'd like to know how to do that, reach out to your account manager. We'd love to show you how to do that, or to make that change for you. Okay, next slide. This is the resource that I mentioned earlier. Before the session, someone was asking about resources, kind of a library of things that you can provide to your students. This is kind of a screen capture there of this PDF, but it's an example of a tool that we provide to schools of an object, a PDF document that they can provide to their students about how to be a successful online learner. And you see that there's several points of good practice that are there. So this is something tangible that your faculty can give out in their courses, that your success coaches can give out, however you'd want to distribute it. We're pleased to provide resources like that. And in our follow-up for this webinar, I'm sure we'll provide a link to that as well. Okay, advance please. All right, so that's the end of this. We're now at our question and answer period. I'll pause and allow my colleague Julie, who's been monitoring that, to let us know if there's a question that we should address.
Thanks, Mac. I have been addressing a few that have come in. I've not seen anything that's applicable to the entire group. So I guess we could just open it up. You guys type in your questions and Mac will be able to see those. But anybody one-on-one, feel free to message me directly.
There was a question earlier while we're waiting on some questions to be submitted that I'd love for our panelists at Howard and Penn State to speak to. It was about students who are new to online learning may not be very engaged up front. What are some strategies that you've used maybe to prompt that early engagement so that students get off to a good start in their online courses?
Building that relationship is super important. So we find ways for faculty and peer-to-peer and faculty-to-peer interaction right off the bat. And I model this in our online certification course with a tool called VoiceThread. So VoiceThread really helps humanize your course, and it's a kind of different type of discussion board. So I have faculty create an introduction using VoiceThread. Well, actually, the first thing I do to scaffold the instruction for them is I introduce a VoiceThread to them as a model and have them just practice commenting on the very last slide. And on the very last slide, the prompt right now has been, and I change it often, tell me one thing you're doing for yourself during this unprecedented time of online learning, with one thing you're doing for your faculty and one thing you're doing for students. And this really starts getting faculty engaged in that conversation, and they get great ideas about things they can do immediately within that first week. First or second week, of course, building those relationships and getting those students engaged. I teach them how to, right, unfortunately, chase some students down, right? You have to nag them. We use a tool called Dropout Detective. We have used Starfish, but you can individualize and personalize messages to students, and they really feel like you are targeting just them. You can also do this in Canvas through the Message Students Who. So we really try to get on top of watching those. They haven't logged in, they haven't read the announcements, you know, those things that we are seeing that they aren't doing, and get them engaged by making that personal connection.
Yeah, very good. Thanks for sharing that. I'm glad you mentioned VoiceThread. In fact, I'll be using VoiceThread next week in a conference, and I really recommend this conference. It's the National Symposium on Student Retention. And that's the name of the game this year, right? As enrollments are dropping, we certainly want to retain the students we have. So Google for that. It is a virtual conference, and I think they've adjusted the price point for that. I'll be doing a presentation with one of our schools, Middlesex Community College. They implemented SmarterMeasure, and over a 2-year period, they saw a 10% reduction in failure rate in their online courses by increasing the level of awareness of learner readiness. So look us up for that presentation next week. That's the National Symposium on Student Retention, but we'll be using VoiceThread there. I did see one question I wanted to speak to is about, can this assessment target non-traditional students? So Sarah, thanks for asking that question. And yes, while we've been talking in this webinar about in the context of helping online learners, the history of this assessment is that it was an online learner readiness assessment. In fact, the very first name of it was READY, which was an acronym for Readiness for Education at a Distance Indicator. And as we used it with many schools, they began to realize, hey, the same traits, attributes, skills, and habits that apply to online learners really apply for all learners. And so we changed the name of the assessment to SmarterMeasure, and we also went through and adapted the assessment so that the wording in the assessment and the wording on the score report is not delivery system specific. So the first version of the assessment may have said something like, as you're taking an online course, but now the assessment will say something like, as you're continuing your education. So there's nothing in the assessment itself or the score report that is online learning specific. So if you have just some non-traditional learners, maybe they're studying face-to-face or whatever that context is, just know that they're not going to run into anything in the assessment that's going to seem awkward or out of place. But we do have a lot of schools that use this for many, many different types of populations. We serve everything from schools that are teaching welding and cosmetology to PhD programs, right? Because learner readiness is a construct that's not dependent on the nature of the degree program or the level of the learner. These are individual things that all learners bring to the table. We're just holding that mirror up to the learner to help them understand more things about themselves.
I can just add in there, Mac, when our graduate school was trying to decide whether or not they wanted to use the assessment, they wanted, of course, to see some data about graduate students, and your folks got them the data that they wanted within just a couple days, and they decided to join in. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, in fact, graduate learners many times have been out of the formal learning context for a few years. And so this process of self-assessment leading to self-awareness is a very appropriate exercise for an adult learner returning to the classroom. Amy asked about when students complete this assessment. Again, there's lots of different places that schools put it. Either some schools use it very early in the recruitment process, others put it in the admissions process. Very often it's used by academic advisors. Sometimes it's put in orientation courses or maybe first year experience programs. Sometimes we'll see specific programs like quality enhancement plans where schools use it, or we see faculty putting it in courses like English 101. So there's no really right or wrong way to use it, but we do encourage schools, wherever you do position it, try to come up with a strategy where there's someone at your school that's looking at that data, and when students are at risk, that you've got some kind of workflow where you reach out to them. And that's what you've heard from Howard and Penn State today, is that they're doing that, and that's really where you see the gains. And for a student, they read the score report, and that's very enlightening, and that's a great experience. But when someone at their school reaches out and says, hey, let's have a conversation about this, that's truly meaningful and can really be a transformative experience for the student.
Mac, not sure if you saw it, but I'm not sure if it's Mila or Mila, up a little higher, refers as asking questions. Do you see that? I can read it if you don't.
I don't see that. If you could read that, please.
Certainly. Does SmarterServices also provide broad tips regarding stress, anxiety, and mental health issues in the online environment, or is it up to each institution to supply, or a combination?
Yeah, so at the end of each of the scales on our score report is that resources for remediation section. And so if there are some resources related to anxiety or mental health or those types of things, you can place those there. There is another assessment that we have crafted at the request of another institution, and it's the test anxiety scale. That particular institution they were a nursing school. And so nurses, the research literature shows, experience a higher degree of anxiety for a few different reasons. One, they have to pass lots of high stakes standardized tests, but two, the nature of their subject matter. If you're really not mastering this content, it literally could be life or death, right? And so the assessments that the nurses take truly are high stakes. And so there's lots of anxiety going in. So we worked with a subject matter expert who already had a scale to allow the student to measure their level of test anxiety compared to others. And then the resource for remediation at the end of that scale is so meaningful because it's this 30-minute audio resource that you listen to, where the person kind of talks you through how to change your mindset, because a lot of test anxiety is actually a form of performance anxiety, because the student feels like, it's like being on the stage, right? I'm afraid I'm going to lock up and I'm not going to do well. Well, what this audio file talks the student through is changing their mindset, not into feeling like I'm about to give a performance, but a feeling of really looking forward to the test as an opportunity to demonstrate what they know, because they're well prepared and they want to be seen as a person that's an emerging professional, and they're anxious and they're looking forward to this assessment, and just changing that mindset to something positive and anticipatory can make a big difference in that level of anxiety. So if you're interested in that, reach out. There's my email there. I can send you some more information about that test anxiety scale.
Dr. Atkins, and to the group, I did share a sample student report there in the it's a PDF link if you want to check that out. I'm sorry, not a PDF, but a URL that is a little bit older. It doesn't include some of the other scales that we have offered now, but it will give you certainly an idea of what Dr. Atkins was referring to when he was mentioning the resources for support in relation to Mila's question.
Thank you. This is Kristen again. I just wanted to remind everybody that we will be sending out the recording of this event, and we will also be chatting out an evaluation form. So if you don't mind filling that out before you leave the webinar today, that would be great. And keep the questions coming. I mean, 8 minutes in a Zoom world, I swear feels like an eternity. So I certainly won't close the webinar down early if people have more questions, but at the same time, you know, no pressure to fill every single second. So I'll get direction from Mac on that. But we did just chat out the link to the evaluation and survey. So please fill that out prior to leaving the room, and then feel free to ask Mac and his team some more questions. And Mac, I will just let you tell me when it's okay to officially close.
I think we're good. I respect everyone's time. I know we're all very, very busy these days, and we got started on time. So let's see, we did have a question coming here. Okay, so I think she's, I'll just read it. I'm wondering if all or one of you can speak to how accessible it is to modify the assessment to meet the needs of students with disabilities. A couple of things there. We've done extensive accessibility testing. When we work with organizations like the Consortium of Community Colleges in California, they do a great job with accessibility. Organizations like Penn State do a great job with accessibility testing. So the assessment as it's presented is very accessible. We have lots of things that have been done. I'm not an expert in that field, but all of the alt text and the control over colors, we do have the ability to make fonts larger within it. So if you're asking about if our interface is accessible, rest assured that it is, but I don't think that you're asking. I think you're asking more about maybe if a person, maybe
it's for the content of the questions that you can modify the wording of the actual question, perhaps.
Okay. We typically refrain from editing the assessment itself because we present it as a standardized assessment. But sometimes the way the assessment is deployed is customized depending on the accommodation that the student needs. That can involve everything from having a reader to read the assessment to a person, or, you know, if they're, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking there, but, you know, different approaches are taken to deploy the assessment to persons with disabilities.
Looks like we've had a little bit more comment about it, Mac, about the
Okay, so
yeah.
thank you. Glad that we did it.
What
Yeah,
Terry?
Alex is a very similar assessment, and really that's what I'm trying to convey here, that it can be scary to students who are new to online learning. It doesn't have to be, and one of the ways that you can help it not be so scary is to allow the student to understand themselves. Self-awareness is the very first step to student success. That's what this tool is designed to do. We're a little bit biased. We think it's a great tool. Thank you for our colleagues at Howard and Penn State also saying that as well. I'll give you that $5 I owe you now. But seriously, thank you for what you shared today. If you don't use SmarterMeasure, use something, right? Help those students understand themselves so that they go into the learning experience with their eyes wide open. So I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up today. You see our emails there. We'd love to continue the dialogue with you. If you do have questions or comments or would like to see the assessment, just let us know.
Great. Thank you, Mac. I feel so empowered. It was such an amazing presentation. I apologize for kind of messing up a couple of your slides. I was just so actually listening to your information. So thank you so much. That was amazing. And again, we will be sending out the recording of this event as soon as possible. And if you have any questions for Mac and his team, reach out to them. And if you have any questions for us, let us know. Thanks again from Innovative Educators, and have a wonderful rest of your day.